Muammar Gaddafi, crazy Middle Eastern dictator or visionary leader far ahead of his time. In this video, we're going to look at the astrology. We're going to decode the astrology charts to see who Muammar Gaddafi really was and how he will be remembered once the dust has settled, once it's all said and done. In addition to this, you'll also find out who Gaddafi was in his past life. All of this in this video. Let's go. Alright, so Muammar Gaddafi was certainly a colorful and controversial figure, one of the most notable personalities perhaps of the last 30, 40, 50 years. And he had a quasi-mythological background. You know, he came from a little village and became this big leader of a big oil-producing nation. He is now generally in the mainstream media seen and presented as a horrible dictator in line with all of the other big bad guys, you know, the big bad dictators of the 20th century. And he was kind of one of the last ones who eventually got what he deserved and good riddance and all of that. And that's the official story that you have in the mainstream media. However, there are also voices. There are people who say that he was actually misunderstood and he was a great visionary, a rebel who was rebelling against the powers that be and who had very progressive ideas. For instance, he was advocating the move away from the petrodollar. And, you know, when he was basically starting already to sell oil in gold instead of dollars, 20, 30 years ahead of his time, he was advocating the union of the Arab world and later of the African continent. He even was suggesting an African currency, the Afro, to be introduced. All of these things far ahead of his time. Now we have obviously the rise of the global south and of these blocks, you know, of different blocks of civilizations as independent, as much more independent cultures and geopolitical players. But in all of these things, Muammar Gaddafi was ahead of his time, maybe 20, 30 years. Now, the astrology, when we look at the astrology, it can tell us who he really was and what his motivations were and what his soul intended to do in a way which is going to transcend all of the narratives that exist right now and that you can find in the official history. Because remember, history is written, always has been written by the winners. The winners write history, and the winners typically present themselves as the good guys, as the moral guys, with the moral high ground. And obviously they present the losers as the abominations, the immoral, and so on and so forth. Now, be that as it may, first of all, the current state of affairs is not always going to remain. Things will change as power structures and power dynamics change. History is also rewritten. And secondly, as more and more people are going to learn and find out about what I'm going to show you in this video and in many, many other videos on this channel and elsewhere where I teach and talk, the astrology does not lie, and it gives us the actual image of the celestial judgment on personalities, because the celestial judgment is independent of whichever human societies and human forces are currently in power or trying to write history according to their desires, according to their narratives. So therefore, this is a very good case to see what I mean, that these discrepancies exist and that they can be decoded with astrology. So let's get into astrology of Muammar Gaddafi to see what I'm talking about. So the chart that you see here right now, it shows you the birth chart. This is the birth chart of Muammar Gaddafi, and it's pretty precise. We know the exact time, 8:35 a.m. and in Libya, Sirte, where he was born. He also died very, very close to that place, kind of full circle. And if you look at the chart, well, let's start with the essential, the basics first to really get like, how can this chart match that life story? A person who, took over his country basically with 27. With 27, he already became the leader of his country. So what you see here is he's got there's a really decently strong constellation here with these two so-called talent triangles. You see this? This is a talent triangle. This is one. And the other one is here, right? These are these two triangles, which are blue, right? And astrologically, they consist of two sextiles and a trine, right? So this is a pretty special figure. It's known as a figure where things run really smoothly, right? Like they come into being almost magically, you bypass resistances and things come into being very smoothly. And he has two of those, right? One of them is with this constellation here, right? So both of them actually have this constellation here, which is Saturn, Uranus. In 11, Saturn, Uranus is the structure rebel, right? The rebellion against established structures, the innovator that breaks established structures, right? But he does so very successfully. And the 11th house is the 11th house is the house of the collective, the society, and so on and so forth, right? So this structure rebel, on the one hand, it's placed into a talent triangle with Pluto on the ascendant and Moon up here. Pluto on the ascendant in Leo. Okay, Leo ascendant is very, very clear. I think you can really see that he is the quintessential Leo ascendant, right? The guy was always wearing like super flamboyant clothes and always, the big show. His hair actually, like ascendant. So, this is something you should know. The ascendant is the most important factor in your chart when it comes to describing your physical appearance, right? There's lots of other still, moon and sun and a couple of other placements and so, but the ascendant is very, very important, right? It's the most defining factor when it comes to describing how you present your energy, right? Ascendant is how you project your energy. And this guy, obviously, with the Leo ascendant, he actually had he looked like a lion, right? With the lion mane and the face like a lion, walking like a lion, right? And the flamboyant clothes and all of that. And there is Pluto on the ascendant as well, right? Pluto, we've got the magnetic personality, right? The super intense and magnetic appearance, hypnotic personality. With Pluto on the ascendant, you're going to have like this super hypnotic presence, right? Especially when it's a Leo, right? So the hypnotic presence. And here the moon is in Aries and in 9, and the moon, so basically moon represents the people as well, right? So we have this magnetic appearance which very smoothly influences the people, right? And that flows together harmoniously with his role as a social innovator and a social rebel. That's one. And then the second talent triangle is again these two, right? The magnetic lion, the hypnotic, charming lion, right? Who's the structure rebel. And then you have here Neptune in 3. Neptune in 3 is the gifted communicator, right? Like the inspired communicator who can, when he communicates, he's kind of getting downloads. He's getting he's going to flow and getting, from higher dimensions. He's almost downloading and directly speaking, right? Like speaking with high level of inspiration. And you've got these two. So you put these two together, these two triangles, talent triangles, right? They both work together to get him into power very quickly, right? And make him a leader as somebody who, came to revolutionize the country. And he did a lot of reforms, actually. There's a lot done, that he doesn't get credit for. Like, people were doing well under Gaddafi, far better than obviously far better than now, when the country has been plunged into complete chaos. It's just warlords fighting against each other. It's just a complete deterioration. Similar as Iraq, actually. Iraq, was a highly developed country in the Middle East, and the same thing happened after it was invaded by Western forces, destroyed, bombed, and really thrown back many decades in their development. Same thing in Libya. But if you look here at his chart, you can see this. He's got the Jupiter, Mercury in 11 as well. He's going to have a lot of ideas. He's going to be somebody who brings great, a wealth of ideas into the society. And now let's go into who is this as a personality? Because what I told you before, this was good to know, but this could be anybody else as well. This could be just somebody who becomes a a powerful innovator in his local, community club or something, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be somebody who becomes a great leader. When we want to look at the historical importance of people, what do we need to do? We need to look at the fixed stars and the asteroids, right? Keep saying this again and again. This is what sets you apart, what gives you a historical role, right? So let's look at that. Let's see what we can find there. And this is also where we find the real intention of the soul, right? The intention of the soul, which a soul carries with them from incarnation to incarnation to incarnation, right? So let's see this. And we've got here the sun. We start with the sun. We always start with the sun, right? The sun tells you the inner essence of somebody, right? Let me just put this a little bit further, somewhere else where you can see better. I think this should be better. Okay. So the sun, it tells you the essence, right? It tells you the essence of the person. And it's super interesting. The level of detail that's in this is really beyond belief initially, but obviously after you understand how astrology works, you're not surprised anymore, but you still think, it will be a big shock for society once this knowledge becomes widely available and widely understood. Because look at the sun. The sun here is together with the asteroids. Well, first, it's in the 11th house, right? The sun is he's the born social leader, the social communicator and leader. And the sun is with the asteroids Arabia and Africa, directly with Arabia and Africa, right? He identifies with Arabia and Africa. He brings light to Arabia and Africa, right? He literally wanted to drive forward the African Union and the Pan-Arab Union, both of those at different times. And what else is here? There is the asteroid. There's also the star Regal, right? Which is the lord, the warlord, the general, right? So he's a general, right? He's a general and a leader who wants to bring together Arabia and Africa. There's also the asteroid Spartacus, right? And Heracles. Spartacus and Heracles. Who are these? Spartacus was a gladiator who rebelled against the Romans, right? So Spartacus stands for the rebellion, the underdog who rebels against the big powerful empire, right? That's on his son. So you've got this basic, and is Heracles. What's Heracles? Heracles stands for the hero of his people, right? The great hero, the greatest hero of a people is Heracles, right? The folk hero, right? So he's the folk hero general who represents Arabia and Africa and is an underdog who fights against the great powers, right? And for good measure, the asteroid Karl Marx is there too. So he's also a social revolutionary at the same time, right? Somebody who wants to bring like social revolution, right? So all of those things are written in this chart. When you just look around the sun here, all of it is here, right? And as if that's not enough, like it's not enough. There's more stuff. You're gonna ask me, is there more? Yeah, there's more, right? There is more. Why? Because otherwise, why do I have this stuff here on the other side? You can see this here, right? Okay, I'll tell you. So first of all, this constellation, it's in a wide opposition here to the galactic center. You see, galactic center makes things very important, gives them galactic importance, right? Cosmic importance, on at least for us, for our, insofar as it pertains to our cosmic game and our cosmic experience that we all share. And then this constellation, the sun, right, he has a couple of things in opposition. Opposition is important too. With asteroids and stars, we can only look at conjunctions and oppositions only, right? You cannot look at a trine or sextile or whatever, all those other things. You look only at conjunction and opposition, right? So what else is here? You've got the sun, and the sun is opposite here. You see here, Tell. Tell stands for William Tell. William Tell was another freedom fighter, was a Swiss freedom fighter who brought down the tyrants, right? You got Hidalgo. Hidalgo was a Mexican freedom fighter, right? A Mexican freedom fighter is here too. You got Robin Hood. Robin Hood is a freedom, kind of like a story of the underdog freedom fighter, right? And then you got Giordano. Giordano Bruno was who? Giordano Bruno was somebody who he presented the truth as he saw it, and he faced death at the hands of the Inquisition. because of that, right? Somebody who was ahead of his time, far ahead of his time, presented the truth as he saw it, and he was punished, right, by the powers that be. That was Giordano. So all of this is on his son. Literally, it's written here in his chart. This guy is incarnated as the quintessential freedom fighter, right? Freedom fighter, a rebel against the powers that be, rebel against great powers, right? And somebody who was ahead of his time in many ways with what he was presenting, right? So this is pretty telling, obviously. Well, what was he presenting? What was he fighting for? We got a couple of hints here, right? When we look at the Mars here, it stands with gold, right? This is what he was fighting for. He was fighting for the gold standard. He was fighting for the gold standard long before, or for gold to be the standard for selling oil, at least, which would be a first step for gold standard, right? Moving away from the petrodollar. And America, you see here, America is exactly on his Pluto, right? And on his ascendant. So his most defining relationship, his most intense and dark relationship, which is Pluto, is with America. Obviously, eventually led to his death, right? This is what brought his death. There's this horrible video with the Hillary Clinton, that abomination of a person who is kind of gloating and giggling about the horrible death that, was inflicted upon Muammar Gaddafi. You can look it up yourself. I'm not going to go too much into the details of this, but all of this, again, is pretty clear, written in the chart here. And as I said before, when we see these charts, when we start to read them, we understand that the cosmic and the celestial judgment is not the same as the one that currently is given to you in mainstream news as how it was, how it really was, right? All the talking points of the mainstream, right? They are temporarily appearing to be the truth for those who don't look beyond and behind the scenes, right? For those who stay on the surface, but they will be swept away eventually because the celestial truth will prevail. The celestial truth will prevail. There's no way around it, right? No matter how much the deceivers will try to manipulate and deceive. This is almost everything that we can get out of the chart that I wanted to share with you. Even how he was eventually remembered is written here in the chart. It's basically given to you as a possibility, right? It doesn't mean that your entire path is already predetermined, but the parameters are set, right? You can play with them and you can project a different energy into them, but you still have to work with those energies that are set on your path. And in his case, you got here Cassandra and Waterloo, right, on his MC. And the MC, the midheaven, is not just your career, right, like on a very base level. On a bigger level, it's how you will be remembered at the end of the day, right? What your life will be remembered for. That's the MC, right? And you've got here the Aries MC, right? He'll be remembered as a pioneer, obviously. But Cassandra was the seer who was condemned to say things that nobody listened to, right? The seer who was too far ahead of her time, right? Like Gaddafi, right? He was too far ahead of his time. And you got Waterloo. Waterloo stands for the big defeat, right? The big military defeat. So even this is written in the chart. This is eventually how he ended, right? As a visionary who was too early for his time, and as somebody who had a great defeat. He was taken down after the Arab Spring, after the kind of color revolutions and the rebels, so-called rebels, that were mostly CIA backed people, Islamists and warlords and all kind of people like that, unsavory people like that. They took him down. You got Daedalus here as well. Daedalus, he got into trouble for taking on the powers that be, right? And he suffered because of that. It's on the Ascendant too. It's really clear once you figure out that, once you figure out how to read this, the whole story is written here. Now, the last thing is, who was Muammar Gaddafi in his past life? Now, with regards to this information, I'm using the work of the astrologer and seer Frank Felber, who is a great pioneer in the field of reincarnation analysis. And he has discovered and unveiled a lot of the threads across history. But in addition to the abilities of the seer, there is always going to be very, very concrete evidence in the charts, right? The charts tell you about the karmic threads that connect one personality with other personalities across history, right? So, and if you're asking me about, what is reincarnation, how does it work, and so on, I'm going to do much more content on this, on the really the metaphysics, the esoteric science of it, right? There's so much to say, but just here the example that will allow you to start to learn, how to work with this. We look at the moon. The moon is very important, right? It's the entire chart is important, obviously, but the moon and the IC are two of the very important things. The moon, traditionally, it stands for past karma, right? It's past karma, and then you have Rahu as well, which stands for past karma. So the moon is very important, and the moon is in a direct opposition here with Neptune, and you've got here the asteroids Valhalla, Hubris, Hannibal, and Rubicon, right? So this tells you that this personality was a great hero, a great warrior, right? Valhalla is like the hall of legendary warriors, right? Who had some type of hubris, right? Who kind of did a very big task, a very big challenge that was even too big for themselves. And in doing so, he crossed the Rubicon, right? The Rubicon, this is the symbolic way of saying that he crossed the point of no return in his conquest, particularly of Rome. Namely, the name itself is here too. He was Hannibal of Carthage. Hannibal of Carthage, right? Hannibal of Carthage, the great Carthaginian leader who was in antiquity the greatest person, the greatest warlord to challenge Roman dominance, right? And the Romans obviously were the powers that be. They were what today is the American Empire, right? And Hannibal was somebody who really, was not intimidated by power, and who stood up and challenged that empire, that massive empire, right? And became legendary. His name is legend. He remains to this day, much talked about in terms of military strategy. And that soul, who was somebody who was born very, very near, very close, right? This is another rule in reincarnation astrology. There's many others. Facial similarity is one. The other one is that most souls, the majority of souls, incarnate again and again, very close in a similar radius in terms of geography and in terms of the people, the ethnic belonging that they are a part of. These are not hard and fast rules. These are heuristics, right? Again, in future videos, we're going to learn much more about this, and I'm going to tell you how to figure out these threads, how to look in your own charts as well, if you're interested, right? There is very, very clear ways to how you can do this, and we can learn this together. Now, so far, so good. Now make sure, please, to subscribe to this video if you haven't done so yet, and like it and comment. Tell me who you want to see next. We can look at so many other historical personalities. For all those where we have confirmed charts, we can do this, right? And there is more information now than was ever available before, mainly because these thousands of asteroids didn't exist in the past, right? They all have become known only recently. The dwarf planets, the asteroids, all these celestial objects, and we have the AI and the tools to analyze them. So this means we have a vast amount of celestial information which simply wasn't available before, right? So this means that in the next couple of years, especially as this research progresses, we will together change how humanity views many of its most important people. Obviously, this is going to go ahead, this is going to go hand in hand with the paradigm shifts that are happening on the political level, on the scientific level, and everywhere else. So I look forward to exploring this further with you in future. Until the next time, be well, all the best, and be blessed.